Joshua Weissman's barbecue ribs have a sweet and savory homemade sauce, a nice crusty exterior, and fall off the bone tenderness. So you'd think this recipe is an S rank, right? Actually, it's a B rank. There's nuance and expertise to American barbecue that a lot of times is just missed by popular YouTube cooks. But there's one specific cook I'm gonna rank today that absolutely misses the mark, and in my opinion created one of the worst barbecue recipes here on YouTube. But first, let's take a look at a recipe that a lot of you requested that I review, which is Brian Lagerstrom's smoked beef chuck roast. Brian cooked his roast on a gas grill using wet wood chips for smoke flavor, and there was a lot I liked about this recipe. He used a big, massive chuck roast, which I highly recommend you do as well if you try this at home, because the smaller ones will dry out during the long, low and slow cooking process. He also got a really nice barky crust, which is a staple of most American barbecues. The only complaint I have is that I thought he used way too much salt, but that's more of a taste preference, so I'm not gonna dock him for that. And plus, just look at this sandwich he made at the end of the video. It's fantastic, easy S tier. Next up, we have Nick DiGiovanni's barbecue chicken wings, which is a deceptive title to this video because these are not chicken wings, they're chicken legs, and they were not barbecued, they were actually deep fried. But with that said, he did make his own honey barbecue sauce for this recipe and tossed the fried chicken in the sauce once they were done frying. Which, if you've never tried double frying your chicken at home, I highly recommend that you give it a try because it gives you an insane crunch. And he also used ketchup as the base for his sauce, which some of you know I am a fan of. And finally, and arguably most importantly, he used a whole stick of butter in his barbecue sauce, which some of you might be thinking, how is that a good thing? But let me explain. So chicken, especially in comparison to pork or beef, is very lean, so it needs all the help it can get in terms of the fat content. So the combo of deep frying the chicken and glazing it in a nice buttery honey barbecue sauce probably made these chicken legs taste out of this world. But with all the positives I just mentioned, Nick did not use MSG in his recipe, and in my opinion, you gotta use MSG if you're frying chicken. In tandem with the deceptive title of this video, and also the fact that this isn't a barbecue recipe at all, I give Nick's recipe a solid B tier. Next recipe is Chef John from foodwishes.com with salt and pepper spare rib. And I will say that Chef John does have a lot of barbecue recipes on his channel, but I picked this specific one because I'm a big fan of Central Texas style barbecue, and traditionally that's cooked with a salt and pepper rub. With that said, Chef John added his own flair by not just using regular black pepper, but also white pepper and his signature cayenne pepper. But overall, a very simple and easy oven rib recipe that anyone can do at home. And to be honest, these are some of the best oven ribs I have seen on YouTube. It has a great crust, and they're not overly cooked and falling off the bone, but still plump and juicy looking with a nice clean bite to the bone. The only knock I have on his recipe is that I like to cook the barbecue sauce on the ribs so that you don't have to spoon barbecue sauce on every single bite like Chef John did, but also because I like the sauce to reduce a little bit so that it kind of becomes cohesive with the rib. I rank this in A tier, but I give him the #1 spot in A tier, because after all, he is the Britney Spears of all the other A tiers. Moving on to Andrew Ray from Binging with Babish's pulled pork recipe. So Andrew did something very cool in his 6-minute recipe video, which was giving 2 recipes. One for a smoked pork butt on his pellet grill, and the other an indoor sous vide oven recipe. So for both of these recipes, he did a few things that personally I would have just done differently. For example, I would have put the liquid smoke on the pork butt before the rub instead of after like Andrew did in his indoor recipe. Or I would have put the pork butt fat side down instead of up in his outdoor recipe. The fat cap would shield the pork butt since it's directly above the heat source in the pellet grill. Also, he used a Traeger pellet grill instead of the superior Camp Chef Woodwind Pro with all new smoke box feature. Link in the description. But with all of that, look at the final product of both of Andrew's pork butts. These sandwiches are super barky and look really juicy. Honestly, just from the looks of the pork butts and the sandwiches, I don't see anything wrong with them, so I'm giving it an S tier. Adam Ragusia gave Texas brisket a try, and he used 2 cookers for his video, a Weber kettle and a gas grill. So pretty standard technique when it came to the Weber kettle brisket, 2-zone cooking, 225 degrees Fahrenheit the whole way through, wrap the brisket in the stall, yada yada. But when he fired up his gas grill, he tried a barbecue technique I actually had never seen before. Instead of using wood chips in a foil packet like I see on every other gas grill barbecue video, he put actual wood chunks on top of the flavorizer bars to add smoke flavor to his brisket. And this is superior because a wood chunk will provide more smoke flavor and it's easier to replace while cooking than using a foil packet. But unfortunately, his execution of the wood chunk technique absolutely failed. And his final brisket on both the Weber kettle and the gas grill was even worse. So I put him in the C tier. So this next recipe comes from one of my all-time favorite cooks, which is Ainsley Harriet's jerk chicken recipe. So Ainsley is a huge inspiration for me and my channel. He's just such a joyful person and his personality just pops. He was simply made for TV. And what impresses me most about him is just how off the cuff he is in his episodes. He's basically doing all of the shots in one take while he's cooking at the same time. And of course, we gotta talk about his jerk chicken. It's nice and charred and bubbling. Man, I can almost smell it through the screen. Simple, but effective. It's an A tier recipe. Next up is Joshua Weissman's How to Smoke a Texas Brisket Properly. And let me tell you, this title is very inaccurate. I did a full review on this video last year, but in a nutshell, he combined a lot of restaurant-style brisket techniques with competition style and ended up with a brisket with a lot of unrendered fat and hardly any bark. And the cherry on top is that at the end of the video, he didn't even try his brisket. Which granted, maybe I'm reaching here, but I'm guessing he probably wasn't happy with his final results either. Interesting fact is Josh is actually from Austin, Texas, which is like the capital of Central Texas style barbecue. So he clearly knows what a good brisket should taste like. So I'm shocked that he uploaded this video before actually locking in the technique. But to be fair, there were some redeeming qualities to his recipe. First of all, he used arguably the hardest smoker to operate, which is the offset smoker, which to me is impressive. And from the clips he showed from his fire and just looking at the brisket at the end of the video, it seems like he managed his fire pretty well. But yeah, a lot to be fixed with his recipe, and I actually plan to revise and redo his cook in a video that's coming out in the very near future, so make sure you're on the lookout for that. And with that, I rank Josh's recipe at the bottom of the C tier. Now this next recipe absolutely blew me away, and I have some serious doubts that any other recipe on this list is going to be able to top it. And that recipe is Guga Foods' brisket and beef ribs video. So a couple of caveats with this. So first of all, Guga Foods is a pit master himself, and he actually holds a world record for cooking a bunch of Wagyu steaks at the same time. But when it comes to barbecue, low and slow cooking, he doesn't have a lot of experience from what I know, so that's why I included him in the list. However, the bigger caveat is the fact that Texas pitmaster Bradley Chud Robinson helped him out big time with his cook, so of course this is gonna get a killer rating. Guga and Chud cooked the brisket and 2 racks of beef plate ribs on 3 different cookers, a drum smoker, a kettle, and bonus points for using a Camp Chef vertical smoker. But if you look at the final product, it looks like it was cooked on an offset smoker. So barky on the outside while being tender and juicy on the inside. It's truly a beauty. I even did a copycat of their cook on a recent video, and man, it was so good. So as you probably have already guessed, Guga and Chud get the S tier #1 rank spot on this list. Cowboy and cook Kent Rollins recently gave a smoked brisket a try on his custom box barrel style smoker. His technique was definitely not perfect. The brisket trim was pretty sloppy, and I could tell the brisket was a little overcooked and burned in some spots. But he rendered all of the fat, and that brisket looked really tender. And Cowboy Kent is like my internet grandpa, and I respect my elders. As a matter of fact, if you like the video so far, pause it, call up your grandparents, tell them you love them, because it will absolutely make their day. Cowboy Kent is in the A tier. Sonny from That Dude Can Cook made a barbecue brisket in his kitchen oven, and it was a super simple recipe. He trimmed it, put it in the oven, and wrapped it. The only real chef's touch he put on his brisket was he made his trademark garlic rosemary salt, which I made this stuff myself, and man, let me tell you, it smelled and tasted amazing. However, I tried this recipe for myself, and after the 12+ hours of cooking the brisket in the oven, all of the aromatics out of the rosemary salt was completely gone. By the end, it tasted like I cooked it with regular salt. This recipe is in the B tier. This next recipe is actually not a recipe at all, but it does come from the cooking channel Internet Shaquille. Now, I don't know his real name, so for this segment, I'm just gonna refer to him as Shaq. But Shaq's video covers all the nuance and factors that should be considered when buying a pellet grill. And he does it in a very conversational and natural flow way that Shaq is best known for. So it's a great watch for anybody, especially for people who are looking to invest in a smoker. Plus, Shaq gets bonus points for featuring my favorite brand, Camp Chef, in his pellet grill lineup, so this is an easy S tier for me. Ethan Schlabowski made oven barbecue ribs two different ways. One way, he used a foil tent contraption with packets of wood chips for smoke, and the other, he used liquid smoke. For his first set of ribs, the foil tent took a lot of steps to build, and it was kind of dangerous. And honestly, with the small amount of smoke he got from the foil packets, I don't think it was worth all the trouble. For his second rack, he used way too much liquid smoke concentrate and didn't dilute it at all before lathering it onto his ribs. But he did cook the ribs very well, till they were tender but not completely fall off the bone, so this is a B tier recipe. Okay, so Sam the Cooking Guy is up with his recipe video titled Texas Style Brisket at Home, Non-Reverse Version. Now you're probably wondering, what the heck is non-reverse version? And to that I say, I have no idea. But anyways, this was another video I did a full review on, so if you want to see that, I will have that linked in the description along with links to all the videos I ranked in this video. In summary, Sam's brisket is for a pellet smoker, which can produce really good results if you know what you're doing. But he cooked his brisket way too hot, wrapped it too early, and didn't rest it long enough. So the final product had unrendered fat on the top, the bark was too light, and he lost a lot of the brisket's juices to the cutting board. But even so, Sam's brisket easily beats both Joshua Weissman and Adam Ragusia's brisket, so I'm putting this on the top of C tier. Swag Daddy Senpai Kai made some pork butts on his pellet grill. He used a good amount of seasoning for those massive pieces of meat and got a nice bark on them and rendered the fat really well. Honestly, pulled pork is probably the easiest thing you can barbecue because even if you overcook it, most people wouldn't be able to tell because you're just gonna mash it up and put it in a sandwich anyway. And if you undercook it, you can just take all of the unrendered fat and throw it in the trash and no one would ever know. But Kai gets bonus points because he gave the pulled pork away to a low-income community, so it's an easy S rank for me. Okay, so now we have reached the worst recipe on this list. A recipe so bad that I'm actually renaming the D tier into the Ramsay Abyss. Because in this tier lies Gordon Ramsay's terrible American-style barbecue brisket recipe. Seared it and then beer braised it until tender and served it with a runny onion gravy. When I first saw his recipe, I thought it was creative, and given his accolades, I figured it would taste awesome. But boy, was I wrong. I tried out his recipe for myself, and it was just bland, unsalted, and oddly spicy. The only redeeming quality was that the brisket was tender. But that was only because of my own brisket cooking skills, because he didn't give any times or temperatures in his recipe. This brisket tasted less like an American barbecue brisket than the Wagyu deep fried brisket I made in my last video, which you can watch on your screen right now. See you guys over there.